Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a close look at the world of Priscilla Presley, specifically through her 1985 memoir, Elvis and Me.
Exactly. We're going to be navigating her very personal story of life with Elvis Presley, from when they first met right through to the divorce.
And for this deep dive, you, our listener, you've pointed us towards some key material. So our main source is the Wikipedia summary of Elvis and Me, which kind of lays out the book's main points.
Yeah, it gives us the framework. And we also have some info, right, about her upcoming second memoir.
That's right, Softly as I Leave You, which gives us a bit of a hint about her life after Elvis.
Mm-hmm.
So our goal here is really to understand Priscilla's side of things, explore those key moments, the dynamics of this, well, incredibly public relationship, but without getting totally bogged down in every single detail.
Yeah, we want to pull out the essence of her experience, what really stands out from her perspective.
Our mission, then, is to give you a richer sense of this iconic relationship, seen through her eyes, sort of going beyond the usual headlines.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Elvis and Me. It starts by setting the scene in Memphis, right? Priscilla's early time there with Elvis.
Yeah, and one of the first things she mentions is her father's reluctance. He wasn't keen on her moving in with Elvis.
Understandable, really.
Absolutely. So the compromise, the initial arrangement, was for Priscilla to live with Elvis's father, Vernon, and his wife, Dee Stanley.
While she went to school in Memphis.
Exactly, a Catholic school.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like she just moved straight into Graceland. There's this sort of propriety attempted.
But that arrangement didn't stick for very long, did it? The summary says she gradually moved in with Elvis.
Right. I think that really speaks to the pull between them. And maybe Elvis's influence in his own home.
You mean despite the plan, it was kind of inevitable?
It seems likely. That initial setup, it looked good on paper, but the connection between them, Elvis's own wishes, it probably just made the gradual move happen, sort of bending the rules.
And what about Elvis's relationship with Dee Stanley, Vernon's wife?
Oh yeah, Priscilla mentions that. Apparently, Elvis didn't approve of his father marrying Dee. Didn't even go to the wedding.
Wow.
Yeah. And Priscilla says while he was civil to Dee at Graceland, he didn't really interact with her much, kept his distance. Gives you a little insight into his other family dynamics.
It really does. Okay, so the book gets into the nature of their relationship early on, before marriage. This is, a period people are often curious about.
Definitely.
Priscilla describes their nights together, but she emphasizes what she calls a lack of overt sexual intimacy. What did you make of that?
Well, it's fascinating. She describes kissing, petting, all that. But Elvis apparently always stopped before actual intercourse.
He gave reasons.
Yeah, he explicitly said he wanted to save it until marriage. He apparently said something like, I'm not saying we can't do other things. It's just the actual encounter. I want to save it.
So a specific boundary.
The very specific boundary. It wasn't about a lack of physical closeness, just that one act.
And Priscilla, she writes that she wanted to please him. And maybe because he saw her as this little girl, she accepted it.
Right. And instead, she says, he taught her other means of pleasing him.
Which definitely suggests a strong sexual element, even without intercourse. Just maybe unconventional for the time?
Exactly. It really highlights the power dynamic, doesn't it? Elvis setting the terms.
And her willingness to go along shows how much she wanted his acceptance, I guess.
For sure. She also mentions this cleansing period Elvis went through, trying to be faithful, control temptations.
Seeing them as a betrayal of her, the woman he planned to marry.
Yeah. It paints a picture of someone, really wrestling with his desires, trying to exert control.
It does. Kind of sets the stage for, everything that followed regarding intimacy. Now, shifting gears to their daily life, the book doesn't sugarcoat things, does it?
Not at all.
Priscilla mentions prescription drugs being present pretty early on, right when she first came to America.
Yeah, that's quite striking. The routine she describes, Placidyls for sleep, sometimes needing more and more.
Which made him groggy and irritable when he finally woke up, usually in the afternoon.
Right, and then came the Dexedrine to, counteract the grogginess and get him moving.
It sounds like a really concerning cycle of dependency starting very early.
It really does. It wasn't just occasional. It seems like it was part of his daily life even then.
But despite that, he had his comforts. She talks about his love for old movies.
Oh, yeah. Classics. Often about family or survival. Things like Les Miserables, Wuthering Heights. It's a wonderful life.
What do you think drew him to those particular kinds of stories? It seems poignant.
It really does. Those films often deal with big themes: love, loss, redemption, Family bonds, getting through hard times.
Things maybe he felt were missing or complicated in his own life.
Could be. Given his own background, the pressures of fame, maybe they resonated deeply, offered some kind of connection or escape. Shows a softer side, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. But it wasn't all quiet movie nights. Priscilla also talks about Elvis's temper,
His explosive temper and his jealous nature, yeah.
including that incident where he threatened to fire Jerry Schilling, one of the Memphis Mafia guys, just for being too friendly with her.
Yeah, that sounds pretty extreme.
What does that tell us about him, do you think?
Well, it points to a real possessiveness, maybe a controlling streak that Priscilla saw up close.
Coupled with anger issues.
Right. It likely created a tense atmosphere sometimes. Suggests maybe a deep insecurity underneath it all, perhaps fueled by the fame, needing to really lock down his personal relationships.
Okay, let's talk about infidelity, because that's a major theme, and the double standards seem pretty stark.
They really do.
Priscilla writes, she knew Elvis was dating Anita Wood when they first met in Germany.
And that it continued for a while even after he came back from the army.
How does she deal with knowing that? Must have been tough.
Incredibly difficult, I'd imagine. Starting a relationship knowing there's someone else. And Elvis's justification about Anita Wood is interesting too.
What was that?
He apparently claimed he didn't make love to her during their whole 4 years together. Like he stopped at a certain point.
That's a very specific claim, almost lawyerly.
Right. Maybe a way to rationalize it to himself or to Priscilla.
And yet, he apparently admitted having affairs with co-stars before he met Priscilla, but just dismissed them as meaningless.
Exactly. Big contrast. His were meaningless, but the implication was Priscilla had to be totally devoted.
That's the double standard right there.
Absolutely. And then later, Priscilla found love letters from Anita Wood hidden away at Graceland.
Ouch, that must have hurt. Confirmation.
Yeah, confirming suspicions, maybe revealing more than Elvis had let on.
And Anita Wood herself, years later, said Elvis told her Priscilla was just a friend, daughter of an army buddy, nothing to it.
Wow. It really shows how he could manage different stories with different people.
Or manipulate, perhaps.
Perhaps. Priscilla also mentions getting suspicious around the time of, reads the name, his latest flame, wondering if the title meant something.
That constant worry about other women must have been exhausting.
Created a lot of anxiety, I'm sure. And then, of course, there was Anne Margaret.
Ah, yes. That seems like it was a particularly big one. The book spends some time on it.
Definitely. It seems different because it was so incredibly public.
During and after Viva Vegas, right?
Exactly. Tons of media attention, speculation, rumors flying about a real romance. Elvis denied it to Priscilla.
But then Anne Margaret announced their engagement publicly.
Yep, in the LA press. That must have felt like a huge betrayal to Priscilla. Very public humiliation.
And her reaction? The book says she threw a vase, demanded Anne Margaret stay in Sweden.
Sounds like it. A pretty dramatic outburst.
Yep.
But then she went back to Graceland the next day.
Still wanting to make it work despite everything. What does that say about where she was emotionally?
It really shows how deeply invested she was. And maybe how vulnerable. The outburst shows the hurt, but the return shows maybe fear of losing him, the power he had over her.
He eventually admitted the affair, right? But said it was over.
Yeah. Though the fact Anne Margaret was the only co-star at his funeral years later maybe suggests it was deeper than he let on to Priscilla.
Good point. And this whole thing clearly left scars on Priscilla.
Definitely. She writes about constantly worrying about other women, even trying to change her appearance, copy their looks to please Elvis.
That's just heartbreaking. That level of insecurity.
It is. And when she did confront him about suspicion, say, about Shelley Fabares, who's mentioned...
Threatened to send her home.
Exactly. That was his tactic. Priscilla says it took her years to see it as controlling behavior meant to shut her down.
Wow. A really clear imbalance of power.
Totally.
Okay, moving into the mid-60s, big changes happening in music. The Beatles arrived.
Right. And the book touches on how that affected Elvis. His record sales dipped.
He must have felt uncertain, maybe threatened.
Seems like it. He hadn't performed live for years, and he was apparently really unhappy with his movies by then, calling them a joke. His dominance was being challenged.
And this unhappiness seemed to push him in some interesting directions. Spiritualism, the occult.
Yeah, he got really into that stuff, but Priscilla apparently wasn't interested.
So a bit of a divergence there in their interests.
Seems like it. Maybe a growing gap, intellectually or spiritually. He was searching for something, and she wasn't on that same path.
Right. And around the time of Clambake, his unhappiness led to weight gain.
Yeah, significant weight gain, which then led to diet pills.
Adding more pills to the mix.
Exactly. On top of the placidils and dextrine. It shows how his emotional state and his reliance on medication were kind of feeding each other. A vicious cycle.
He also got into seeking a higher state of consciousness.
Yeah.
Metaphysics.
Deeply interested. And there was even a period of celibacy based on teachings from an Indian guru.
Celibacy? Wow, how did Priscilla react to that?
Well, she says he talked a lot about controlling desires, spent nights reading metaphysical books in bed, even while taking sleeping pills.
The contradiction there.
Right. She recalls him worrying that their different levels of interest in all this might make them incompatible. Sounds like she struggled to connect with that side of him.
Did they experiment with other things? Like drugs?
Yeah, the book mentions brief experiments with marijuana and LSD. Sounds like they didn't last long, though.
Interesting. So a period of searching, trying different things, spiritual, chemical.
Exactly. Looking for fulfillment or escape, maybe. But it seems none of it provided the lasting answers he wanted.
And then finally, marriage. May 1st, 1967, Las Vegas.
Yep.
She wrote that being called Mrs. Elvis Presley felt fitting, better than other labels she'd had. What do you think she meant?
Well, it probably gave her a sense of legitimacy. After years of being the young girlfriend, this ambiguous status, Mrs. Elvis Presley was a defined role. Maybe more security, more respect in the public eye.
Made sense. Their honeymoon sounded like a whirlwind, though. Sinatra's jet to Palm Springs, then the ranch, but still no privacy. Not really. Press everywhere. It seems like even in those moments, the outside world was always there. Hard to have truly private time.
And they hadn't planned on kids right away, but she got pregnant unexpectedly.
Right. And she actually considered an abortion. Partly because of things Elvis had said in the past about women gaining weight during pregnancy.
Wow. That shows how much pressure she felt about his expectations for appearance.
Totally. Her insecurity about her body, fueled by his comments. It's quite telling. She even dieted during the pregnancy, weighed less after giving birth than before.
That's intense. And adding to the stress, there were rumors about Elvis and Nancy Sinatra around that time, his co-star in Speedway.
Yeah, exactly. Difficult timing, to say the least.
But then Nancy Sinatra offered to throw her a baby shower. That's surprising.
It is. Priscilla was apparently apprehensive, but accepted, and they actually got along well.
But then Elvis proposed a trial separation while she was pregnant.
Seemingly out of nowhere. Yeah. Imagine how devastating and confusing that must have been.
Facing separation while pregnant, awful. Huge emotional turmoil. But he did change his mind. And 2 months later, February 68, Lisa Marie was born.
A new chapter. But the complexities didn't just vanish, I assume.
Not at all.
Although this 68 comeback special, that was huge for his career, right? Did it help the marriage initially?
It seems like it did, yeah. The special was massive, totally revitalized his career. People remembered why he was the king.
That professional high must have brought some positive energy back.
Initially, yes. He went back to recording in Memphis, got huge hits like Suspicious Minds. His Vegas residency was a massive success, too.
But success meant more touring, more time away.
Exactly. And unfortunately, that created space for the old patterns. The infidelity crept back in. Priscilla mentions finding more letters from other women around this time.
And by this point, Priscilla acknowledges she'd had her own affairs, too.
Yeah. The marriage was clearly breaking down. Distance, infidelity on both sides. The strain was showing.
She describes a last straw incident in Vegas involving rough sex.
Yes, which she felt was Elvis's reaction to finding out about her affair with Mike Stone, her karate instructor.
Yeah.
A really disturbing, pivotal moment.
Sounds incredibly painful and marked a real turning point.
Definitely. It showed how much things had deteriorated.
Yeah.
Communication, respect, gone. And then there's the revelation that Elvis actually considered hiring a hitman for Mike Stone.
Seriously, a hitman?
In his anger, yeah. Thankfully, he didn't go through with it. But it shows the intensity of his jealousy and rage. Shocking stuff.
It really is. It speaks volumes about how volatile things had become. So they finally separated in early 72.
February 72. And the divorce was finalized amicably in October 73. They agreed on shared custody of Lisa Marie.
Priscilla mentions being struck by Elvis's physical appearance during the divorce proceedings. His hands were swollen.
Yeah. It's a poignant detail, isn't it? Kind of foreshadowing his declining health in those last few years.
So sad. And he died less than 4 years later.
Tragic. And after his death, his father even had his body reburied, didn't he? Because of the intense public focus, worries about theft.
Just shows the craziness surrounding him even after death. Now, the book, Elvis and Me, it was a bestseller, but critics weren't all raving, were they?
No, not universally praised. Robert Hilburn, in the LA Times basically questioned if it was really that significant.
How so?
He kind of saw it as sensationalistic, like a carnival curio in the sideshow called Elvis, not really important literature. He also raised ethical questions about people close to stars sharing intimate details after they're gone.
And Brick Sledge in the Enterprise Journal had an interesting take, suggesting some fans might not want to read it.
Yeah, because Priscilla showed a very human, flawed Elvis, warts and all. Sledge thought some fans might prefer the idealized image, though he did admit some might find the warts attractive.
Interesting point about fan perception versus reality.
Definitely. Challenges those illusions.
And then Danny Romine in the Tallahassee Democrat brought up Peter Pan syndrome.
Yeah, suggesting Elvis never really grew up, and Priscilla was like an adoring Wendy who didn't push him to mature.
That's quite a psychological analysis, Peter Pan syndrome. Basically, an adult acting immaturely, avoiding responsibility.
That's the idea. Rumani suggested that dynamic contributed to their problems.
Despite those critiques, the book's impact has been huge culturally.
Oh, absolutely.
It directly inspired Depeche Mode's Personal Jesus.
That's right. Martin Gore from the band said it was about how Elvis was Priscilla's mentor, her everything. That kind of worship dynamic in relationships shows how her personal story tapped into broader themes.
And it's been adapted multiple times, a miniseries in '88.
And the recent Sofia Coppola film, Priscilla, from 2023, with Priscilla herself as an executive producer.
Which really highlights the ongoing fascination with her side of the story.
For sure. It keeps getting retold. And now she's releasing another memoir.
Right. Softly, As I Leave You, Life After Elvis, a Memoir, coming out fall 2025.
It sounds like it's going to cover everything after Elvis and me. Her life post-Elvis, losing Lisa Marie, her marriage to Michael Jackson, her own career.
And it promises more intimate stories about her romantic life with Elvis, too. Stuff not shared before.
Apparently so. It suggests there are still more layers, maybe new reflections on her time with him, even after all these years.
It'll be really interesting to see how her perspective might have shifted over time, especially with everything that's happened since.
Definitely.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into Elvis and me, what are the big takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the main thing is that Priscilla's memoir gives this incredibly unique personal view of a relationship lived under, the brightest spotlight imaginable.
It shows the complexities, the contradictions.
Exactly. Her whole emotional journey, from the seemingly innocent start to dealing with fame, infidelity, finding her own way, it goes way beyond the headlines. It shows the humans involved.
It really does paint a picture far removed from just the tabloid stuff or the fan worship. You see the vulnerabilities, the struggles on both sides.
And, the fact she's revisiting this period again with a new book, it makes you think, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, how do our own understandings of our pasts, especially big relationships, change over time? Do we see things differently decades later? What new insights emerge?
You wonder what aspects of the story from Elvis and Me might look different to her now, or what she might emphasize in Softly, As I Leave You.
Precisely. Will things be reframed? Will we get a new lens on it all? It's definitely something interesting to think about.